Hello everyone, we were very happy to receive more than 420 registrations for the webinar. For those of you who couldn't connect on the D-Day, we are pleased to share with you the recording today. You will see that due to some technical problems at the beginning, Thierry's presentation doesn't include the camera. We are very sorry for this inconvenience. You will find in the slide the contact details of our speakers. If you have some specific questions, don't hesitate to get in touch with them. They will be more than pleased to answer to them. Enjoy the video and talk to you soon.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. So welcome. Thanks for joining this webinar. We are broadcasting in Ho Chi Minh City, Vietnam. I'm Michael. Together with Source of Asia, SOA today, we are going to bring you guys a very interesting topic. We will talk about the how you are going to build a more resilient supply chain, and then why Vietnam is a more preferred choice. So year 2020 hasn't been a very easy year for a lot of business. I think a lot of you have come across lockdown in your community, and if you are a manufacturer, your plant may have been closed, or your supplier may have problems to ship you the materials for your production. If you are manufacturing in China, then your products may be subject to higher tariff because of the US-China trade tension. So all of these things happen that make us think if we have to re-engineer our supply chain, or even have a relocate part of the supply chain or manufacturing base to other countries. And then today we are going to cover why Vietnam is a more preferred choice to a lot of investors. So let's just dive into it and waste no time. So Thierry will first of all share with you the Vietnam attractiveness, and then Jean-Jacques is going to brief you the newly signed trade agreement between Europe and also Vietnam. Then I will share with you some tips on how to set up a business or set up a factory in Vietnam, and some market update as well. Last but not least, Romain is going to share with you his experience of running a factory here in Vietnam. And then at the end, we are going to answer your questions. Thank you. Let me pass to Thierry to start the introduction.
Thank you, Michael. Hello to everyone. It's a big pleasure to be in the webinar with all of you today. Let me start with a quick introduction. I've been working and living in Vietnam for 20 years. I started by running some factory in the north of Vietnam. And 15 years ago, I opened my own company, SOA. And we are basically supporting about 50 foreign companies every year to come to Vietnam, both for their commercial development and also more recently for their industrial setup. So I will now share with you some input about the reason why Vietnam has become one of the most attractive manufacturing hubs. You probably have seen by yourself in the past few years, and even more in the past few months, Vietnam definitely has come on top of the economic news. Among all these headlines that you can see on the screen, let me just highlight 3 of them, which I believe are a good sum up of the situation that we are facing now in Asia. The first one, the World Economic Forum, about a year ago, published a long article about the story of Vietnam economic miracle. This was basically wondering how Vietnam, who was one of the poorest countries in the world just 20-25 years ago, has now become a very strong middle income economy. The second one, recently, end of 2019, in the New York Times, one article, Your Next iPhone might be made in Vietnam, thanks to the trade war. This article explains that actually in 2019, Samsung closed its last smartphone factory in China. And beginning of 2020, Samsung closed its last laptop factory in China, both production being actually moved to India and Vietnam. And the last one, just a couple of weeks ago, in Asia time, Vietnam poised to be the big post-pandemic winner. As quoted by Home Depot vice president, which is one of the biggest import company in the US, 2 months ago, he said in a newspaper, I am not aware of a single supplier who is not moving some form of manufacturing outside of China. Actually, few data already reflect the importance of this shift. If you look at this data, these are the custom, you can see that in 2019 compared to 2018, the exports from China to US has plunged by about 15%, which bring back Chinese level of export to US to their level of 2013, so 6 years ago. And at the same time, Vietnam saw a very strong increase. If we consider the whole year, we are even at 40% to export to US, which adds about 15 billion goods value to Vietnam export to US. Out of about 100 factories leaving China, we estimate that about 20 to 25 of them actually choose Vietnam for their relocation. So how to explain such a move? Why, for instance, Samsung top management decide to move to new countries? As for me, in the past 5-7 years, I would say, there has been 3 different factors which successively add one to the other and push industry leaders to consider moving their supply chain. The first one is definitely the increase of production costs in China. There has been 4 main reasons for this production cost increase. First, lower productivity growth. Number 2, a non-favorable exchange rate. 3, a strong increase in the energy cost. And the last one, as for me the most important, a sharp wage increase. If you look at the manufacturing costs between US and China, you can see that in 2000, labor cost in US was about 22 times higher than the one in China. This year, in 2020, US manufacturing is only 4 times higher than in China. And this gap is expected to keep on reducing in the next years with the decrease of the working age population in China. So today, manufacturing in China is more expensive than manufacturing for some range of products than Mexico, India, Vietnam, or Russia and Romania. The second reason to explain the shift is the US-China trade war. Basically, risk becomes part of the equation. This started probably, as you know, in the early 2018 with some new custom duty put on Chinese products to US. 10%, 25%, sometimes 30%. This has been like a big wake-up call for the industry leader, because what's the point of going or staying in China if your production cost advantage, which has already been reduced, as we just noticed, can also be suddenly disturbed by sudden, unexpected new custom duty. And if we look at the category of products which face the highest decrease in export from China to US, we can see that these are exactly the same one who face the higher new custom duty. The third reason explaining this shift is a very recent one, beginning of this year with the COVID crisis. Basically, you should not put all your eggs in the same basket. What happened beginning of this year is a sudden and complete lockdown of one of the most industrial Chinese provinces. At that time, many companies realized how dependent they were from this location. If you look at the high-tech and semiconductor range of products, you can see that more than 90% of the world's largest companies actually buy their finished product or semi-finished product from sometimes one single supplier, from one single location and one single country. And of course, if there is a blocking on a quarantine, then your whole supply chain is completely disturbed. Quoted a few weeks ago, it's a good sum up as for me about what's going on. The coronavirus has only added one more concern about concentrating production too heavily in one place. So it's more than just cost. It's about continuity of supply chain management. That's why we call our webinar Resilience. As for me, two things are remarkable. First, it's how fast it happens. I mean, 5 years ago, if you plan to open a factory and production facility, basically you look at China. Today, in almost every case, you will at least consider Vietnam as a strong potential alternative. And second is how strong this production shift happened. Some companies, it's not just they will open a new factory because they need to increase their production. Sometimes they just reduce or close one factory to move it to Vietnam. And this requires time, management, money. You don't do that, basically, if you don't expect a strong and quite quick medium-term return on investment. However, let's be clear, Vietnam or any other Southeast Asian country will not replace China. They don't have the size or the ability to do so. So I believe it's more likely to be a gradual shift than a dramatic. One country among all this emerged as the big winner from this production shift. It's Vietnam. And let me go through the 6 main reasons why. The first reason to explain this Vietnam attractiveness is the access to the large and booming ASEAN market. You don't come to Vietnam just for Vietnam market. Through Vietnam, you can have access to this ASEAN market. ASEAN was created in 1967. It's an intergovernmental organization, composing of 10 countries that you can see on the map. And this is one of the most dynamic economic in the world. To give you an idea of what we're talking about, if we compare ASEAN with EU, you can see that for almost the same size, ASEAN has about 150 million people more, so it's a bigger market. And the growth rate over the past 15 years has been between 4 and 5 times higher than the one in EU. If ASEAN was a single economic bloc in a single country, it would be today the 5th economy in the world, just behind Germany and Japan, that they are expected to overcome in the next about 20 years to then become the 3rd economy in the world behind US and China. The second reason to explain Vietnam attractiveness is its perfect strategic location. First, Vietnam is very close to China. It can seem a bit paradoxal. I mean, why leaving China to go to such a close country? But actually, it makes sense. You still need to have some components or semi-finished product or raw material probably coming from China. And Vietnam has a very easy road access and sea access with China. And then Vietnam, with its 3,000-kilometer coastline and about 50 seaports, is very well connected to the global supply chain. The third reason, as for me, by far the most important, which explains Vietnam's success, it's its population and its labor force. Many people don't know, but Vietnam is the 14th country in the world with number of people, almost 100 million, and it's expected to reach 120 in 2050. This makes it your second biggest market in Southeast Asia behind Indonesia. The age structure is also very positive, with 70% of the population below 35 years old. And this means that in the coming years, the working age population in Vietnam will keep on increasing. This allows Vietnam to have a very competitive labor cost. If you compare again with its neighbor, you can see that the cost of labor in Vietnam, for of course the same qualification, is about 60% lower than in China. Fourth reason, Vietnam, since 1986, which is what we call the Doi Moi, the start of the economic reform, Vietnam knows a very stable opening of the country, connection with other countries, world organization, and to the world economy. This has been always the wish of the government. So they joined ASEAN, they joined the World Trade Organization, many FTA, last one being with Europe. And in order to attract this foreign investor, Vietnam has increased a lot its spending in infrastructure. Today, Vietnam spends about 6% of its GDP in infrastructure, which is a bit below China, but well above most of the other Southeast Asian countries. Fifth reason, it's a booming economy. We talk about Vietnam miracle. As for me, I believe we are still at the beginning of it. Just one graph. If you look at the GDP per capita, you can see that it was about barely $200 up to the end of the 90s. And it has been multiplied by more than 10 to reach $2,700 US and expected to go over 3,000 very soon. All this makes Vietnam today the 44th economy in the world, adding 16 positions in 10 years. You know, if you look at all the global index, like the competitive index or the ease of doing business index, Vietnam is always gaining 10, 15 positions over the past 10 years. All this makes Vietnam, and this is, as for me, a stunning result, the 8th top investment destination in the world, attracting between 15 and 20 billion US foreign direct investment, which is about 6% of its GDP. And the last reason, we already mentioned it a little bit, is that Vietnam is definitely a country very much open to trade. Compared to Malaysia, Thailand, Indonesia, whatever, Vietnam is a country who has signed the most number of foreign trade agreements, FTA, connecting the country with all major economies in the world. The most recent one is the EVFTA, European Vietnam Foreign Trade Agreement, which has come into force just a few weeks ago. And it's my pleasure now to let Jean-Jacques, who is an expert of this EVFTA, to give you some of his input.
So thank you very much, Thierry, for this presentation. As some of you might have seen, we have some live technical problems. So we will just be switching the computer so that you can see us. Okay, so I hope it's better now. Let's try to see both of us. I think it's okay. Maybe a bit more on the side. Okay. So thank you very much, Thierry, for sharing the many reasons of Vietnam's attractiveness. So I'm happy now to welcome Jean-Jacques BOUFLET, who is a former civil servant of the European Commission and also former head of trade of the EU delegation to Vietnam. And now he's acting as a vice chairman of the EuroCham, which is the European Chamber of Commerce in Vietnam. So thank you very much for being with us today. I have 7 questions for you today. And the first one would be, so you've been following all these negotiations about EVFTA since the beginning. So can you maybe give us some historical insights about the long-term process and maybe what were the expectations both from Europe and also from Vietnam?
Yeah, hello everyone. Yes, I had the opportunity in my previous capacity as a EU civil servant member of the EU delegation in Vietnam to participate in the negotiation of the free trade agreement since the beginning, 2012, until the conclusion 2015. And that gave me some insight about the negotiations. To make a long story short, we started first with an ASEAN EU free trade agreement, but after 2 years we had to suspend it because we were not progressing enough. I mean, ASEAN is a bit diversified. You have different type of countries. Some of them are developed, some of them are underdeveloped, and some were already benefiting from free access to the European Union market, so they were not inclined to take commitment for liberalizing import from EU. So we decided to go on a handful of countries which were identified as the most prone to accept an ambitious new generation free trade agreement. And that's why we, after Singapore, we select Vietnam, and I must say we were able to conclude within 3 years, which is really fast.
Okay, so that's what we call the building blocks strategy, right?
Yeah.
Okay, and maybe to come back on the expectations, so what would you say were the expectations from Vietnam and from Europe?
Well, the expectation were to have a free trade agreement. That is, the first purpose of a free trade agreement is to liberalize the trade. The second is to secure the trade, because your market access are guaranteed by a treaty. So you cannot change and suddenly increase the duty, reinstored barrier to trade. For business, it's very important because you have a long-term perspective and you can mobilize your investment.
Okay, so maybe that's one of the reasons why the EU considered or described the EVFTA as the most ambitious free trade deal ever concluded with a developing country. Can you tell us what are the main positive impacts expected?
Well, yes, it is a new generation free trade agreement. So, of course, the main part remain the elimination of custom duty on import. But beyond that, you have also all the trade facilitation aspect and the reduction of technical barrier to trade. Nowadays, it's not only the duty, which is the greatest obstacle, but it's the red tapes or the administrative burdensome procedure, and also the technical barrier, the norms, which have to be adapted, because you have to produce according to the norms applicable to your market of destination. Beyond that, we try to cover not only trade in goods and services, but also the new topic like public procurement in a country like Vietnam, where you still have an important public sector. Public procurement is an important part.
Which we will be discussing in the next question. Some in the details, because many of you, the participants, are industrials who would like to really implement. So let's go to the details. Talking first about the elimination of custom duties. Can you tell us exactly what is the process and maybe how quick it will be implemented?
Well, it depends, of course, of the goods. So that was the core of the negotiation. We had to negotiate over 3,000 custom tariff position. So you have a first bulk, which will be the goods liberated upon entry into force of the agreement. That is since the 1st of August of this year, where the duty will be reduced to zero automatically upon entry into force. Then you have the gradual reduction for the EU, we have committed to eliminate the custom duty over 7 years. In general, it is progressive. So every year you reduce a little bit until you come to zero after the 7 years. And for Vietnam, because it is a developing country, we accepted some asymmetry. Vietnam will take 10 years to liberate fully its custom duty.
Okay, very nice. Of course, if some of you would like to have more precise information about it, we remain at your entire disposal to give you the exact tariff decrease of your own sector. The second thing that we talked about, apart from custom duties, what would be the other benefits when you are a manufacturer in Vietnam and you would like to export back to Europe? I heard about self-declaration of origin. Can you maybe tell us a bit more about that?
Yes, as I told you, the main benefit is the exemption of duty and the trade facilitation. So when you settle in Vietnam to manufacture goods for re-export to the EU, it will be considered to be a Vietnamese good, and as such, it will benefit from the free trade condition, that is elimination of duty and other facility. Among some of the modernization to the procedure is the self-declaration. As you know, traditionally in Vietnam, when you were producing goods and you wanted to export to another country, you have to submit a certificate of origin, which is delivered by in general by custom services, sometimes by Chamber of Commerce. It depends on the type of goods. This procedure was a bit complicated, etc. The free trade agreement has allowed first for European goods exported to Vietnam to replace this system of certificate of origin by a self-declaration by the producer. And the good news is that Vietnam is about, not yet, but is about to follow the same thing. So the procedure will be very simplified for certifying the origin of the good and then the eligibility to the tariff reduction.
Okay, so it means probably no dependency anymore to any third institution. So that's definitely a good aspect of the EVFTA. So just before you were talking about public procurement, which is also a very important point. Can you explain us concretely how it will be a benefit for a factory located in Vietnam?
Well, public procurement traditionally were excluded from free market, so already in the WTO, but now more and more in bilateral free trade agreement, we tend to extend the liberalization, the trade liberalization to public procurement. In the case of Vietnam, Vietnam has accepted to give national treatment, that is to consider foreign supplier as on par with domestic supplier for participating in a procurement procedure, tender procedure, for example, and Europe also will accept Vietnamese producer, bidder, and Vietnamese goods for participating in public procurement, some types of public procurement to be carried out in Europe. Okay, so if you are, for example, manufacturing furniture in Vietnam and an hospital in Europe wants to make a public procurement tender procedure for buying this type of furniture, your company settled in Vietnam will be able to participate to the tender procedure.
Okay, thank you very much for this explanation. I hope it makes it a bit clearer for everyone. Let's come to one other very important part, which is cumulation of origin. So it might be a term that you've not heard about yet, but it would be very important. I'm thinking especially for our registrants from Korea. So can you also explain to us what is concretely this cumulation of origin?
Well, to be eligible to the benefit of the free trade agreement, the good must be originating from EU or from Vietnam in the case of Vietnamese export to Europe. So normally only goods produced in Vietnam and qualifying for the criteria of origin. It's a bit complex, so I cannot go into detail. You have several types of criteria, but normally only goods produced in Vietnam and qualifying to the rule of origin can be eligible to the benefit of the free trade agreement. We have accepted to extend the origin beyond the origin of Vietnam and the origin in the EU, also origin in third country which had both a free trade agreement with both Vietnam and EU. For the time being, it's the Republic of Korea who has a free trade agreement both with Vietnam and EU. So in other words, you can cumulate the origin produced in Vietnam with the origin produced in Korea, which is the case for a mobile phone, for example. If you have some parts produced in Korea, you will be able to accumulate this origin with the part of the goods produced in Vietnam, so that you can to reach the minimum required for having the free trade origin. So it is, of course, an important incentive for foreign company to manufacture in Vietnam while incorporating some of the goods originating from their home country. Japan is not yet fully eligible, but as Japan has got free trade agreement with both Vietnam and EU, Japan will be eligible as soon as the Trade Committee will update the list of the country eligible for this cumulation of origin.
Thank you very much for the clear explanation. So I will come to my last question, which concerns the EVFTA. For those of you who might not know it, the EVFTA has been split basically between EVFTA and EVFTA, which is the Investment Protection Agreement. So can you tell us what are the next steps of the full implementation of this EVFTA?
Yes, in reality, we used to say free trade agreement, but in reality, we have two agreements, one free trade agreement and one investment protection agreement. The reason, to make a long story short, is that we had, during the time when we negotiated the agreement, it was one single agreement. But after a decision of the European Court of Justice, which has redefined the competence of the Union and the remaining competence of the member states, we had to separate the agreement, to split it in two parts. And both have been ratified, so that's why we have two agreements. Both have been ratified by Vietnam and also by the European Union institution, but the investment protection agreement still need the individual ratification of each and every member state. We have 27, 28 of them, so each of them will have to ratify it alongside with the ratification of the European Union institution. So it could take 2 to 3 years. So that's why it cannot enter into force now. But in terms of, but the agreement has been signed, already half ratified, so it will not change. And you can be sure that when it will enter into force, your investment will be protected, as well as the trade. Trade will be protected by the free trade agreement. Investment will be protected by the investment protection agreement. And 2 to 3 years, I mean, if you are a good businessman, normally you anticipate. So it means that you should already take this agreement also in consideration.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Jean-Jacques. I hope it helped all of you to understand a bit better the EVFTA and its complexity. So thank you very much. We will now talk to very concrete things about Vietnam. I welcome again Michael to talk about the industrial update. Thank you.
Okay. Okay. Thank you, Jean-Jacques. It's by far the most informative EU EVFTA presentation and also the introduction. I hope you guys find it informative. If you guys have any questions, stay till the end, and then you can always ask your questions through the platform, and then we'll try to answer, get back to you at the end of this presentation. So basically, I mean, right now you guys should have very good knowledge about the advantages of setting up business in Vietnam, and then how Vietnam is indeed the most preferred choice of relocation in Asia. So basically, you can see from the graph on this slide, you can see that Vietnam has experienced the tremendous growth of manufacturing based on the value added to the supply chain. So it's by far the have a much higher growth than the rest of the ASEAN countries. So basically, I mean, if you go to department stores, if you go to supermarket, or you go to apparel stores, I mean, you can find a lot of products actually right now is made in Vietnam. So you can see Nike, Adidas, or Samsung, more than 50% of their production are actually made in Vietnam. That's something that we will probably see more and more in the future. Okay, so then this slide, we are going to talk about the North and South different types of industries allocate in these two regions. So basically in Vietnam, it's a very elongated country. So in the north of Vietnam, which is near the capital of Hanoi. So this is an area with more investments coming. So we can see a lot of electronics, we can see a lot of computers, we can see a lot of machineries and equipment. Some of the big names that you guys should be very familiar with will be Samsung, Foxconn, Canon, Ford, LG, a lot of from Korea and Japan, definitely with some US and also Europe investment as well. The latest newcomer to the north of Vietnam will be Apple. I mean, they are going to produce probably new iPhones, or even or maybe airport from the north of Vietnam. And for the south, we have the biggest city in the south will be Ho Chi Minh City, and then we have more of the traditional, conventional industries. We have textiles and garments. We have plastics and metal processing, food and furniture in the south. So here are some of the big names that you guys should be very familiar with as well. So you can see that we have a lot of investments from different countries. We have from US, we have from Europe, Asia, definitely Japan, Korea are they are the two biggest investors in Vietnam in the past decade. And then you can see there are a lot of different industries as well. We have food and beverage, we have electronics, automobile, and then you can find a lot of consumer goods, home appliances, and furniture. So basically, I mean, relocating your supply chain or manufacturing base from China or from other countries to Vietnam is a very strategic and bold move. We know there are a lot of advantages, but at the same time, we want you guys to share with you guys some tips so that you guys can manage the risk, because relocating is such a big strategic decision. So the first thing I want to share with you guys, the tips is you guys need to, if you guys are relocating, you have to choose industrial park rather than any places, random places outside of industrial park. So in Vietnam, we have more than 250 industrial parks across the countries. So because they are in the industrial park, so the land use is zoned for manufacturing. Because it's shown for manufacturing, then for you guys to obtain the license to do operation, to export, that will be much easier. And then more importantly is that there will be tax incentives available for most of the industrial parks. So in Vietnam, the corporate income tax, CIT, is actually the lowest among the lowest in ASEAN countries. So the corporate income tax in Vietnam is 20%. If you are investing or if you are setting up your factory in industrial park, so you can enjoy some tax incentive, which is like the pretty standard one will be first 2 years will be exempted, totally waived. And then for the subsequent 4 years will be 50% off, meaning the first 2 years you are paying 0% of income tax. And then the third or to 7th year, you are paying only 10%. And of course, because like Vietnam is trying to get more investment from the foreigners or from the overseas, there are certain locations or certain industrial park that draws high-tech industries or special economic zone that will offer a little bit more of like tax incentive. Okay, so let me share with you the second reason or second tips for your setup in Vietnam. So in Vietnam, basically you can see it's still a very developing country. So that's why location is a very, very important thing when you choose where you want to set up your factory. Road infrastructure is not that good. Only 20% of the country's national road are paved. Again, it's a very long, elongated country. We have like 3,400 more kilometers of like coastal line. So if you are shipping things from north to south, you will by truck, then it's going to take like almost a week. So that's why locating your factories close to the seaport. We have like 2 in Vietnam International Seaport. Basically, in the south is like close to Ho Chi Minh City. In the north is like Hai Phong area. So these 2 places will be more advantageous for you guys in case you want to relocate or set up your factory and then keep your logistic costs low. So here is the map for you guys reference. Hanoi is in the center, and then to the east we have like Hai Phong. So from Hanoi to Hai Phong, the driving distance, driving time is around like within 2 hours with the highway. Previously, I mean, like before this like highway was like established, from Hanoi to, which is the capital, to Hai Phong, which is the largest like seaport in the north, will take up to like 5 hours. So in the north, we have seen a lot of like infrastructure improvement. And then for BW, for us, we have like facilities, we have ready-built factories along the highway from Hanoi to Hai Phong. And here in the south, I mean, the infrastructure is not so developed compared to the north, but still it remains to be a very open economy, and a lot of like investors would prefer to have their factories established in the south. Binh Du, which is like you can see we have like a number of like projects in, and Dong Nai are 2 of the major destination for investors. The third tips that I would give you guys is like we have to be careful, or we have to acknowledge the labor cost, because like a lot of investors coming to Vietnam, they want to they think like the labor cost is much lower than the neighboring countries, which is the truth. But at the same time, we have to be careful to see where we are going to locate your factory. If you are setting up your factory just adjacent to like Samsung or Foxconn, then they are drawing a lot of workforce. So you guys have to be very careful in terms of like choosing where you guys want to go. And then in terms of the labor wages, we can give you some reference. Region 1 is the urban area. The minimum wage is around $190 US per month, while for region 4, which is like the rural area, probably is like only around like $130 per month. It's quite a big gap. But then like you have the trade-off of like setting up your factory in region 4 will be definitely the infrastructure support. Region 1 will be the big cities. So that will be a trade-off if you guys have to, or actually it's more preferred than for most of the investors. So and then we are going to talk about the leasing and also the leasing land and also leasing ready-built factory. So RBF here stands for ready-built factory. This is something that we BW built. I mean, we design. We have like some units available so that to facilitate investors who come to Vietnam and then quickly set up their business. For long-term lease, it's like in Vietnam, we don't have this kind of like buying land concept because like it's a more likely it's going to be a leasing the land use right for maximum of like 50 years. So ready-built factory is becoming a more popular choice. The advantage of like having a ready-built factory is that you can start off with a very small size to test the market first, and then based on your expansion plan, you can always like increase your capacity. And then the second thing is that you have like less burden on your cash flow. You can focus on your production, your production, and also put your cash flow on your R&D. The third thing about is that you don't have to worry about all those like construction related license, or you don't have to deal with the authority on like getting the master plan, getting all those like permit required for construction, which can be quite headache. The last but not least, the advantage of like having RBF rather than building your own factory is like the timing. It's going to be a much shorter time if you just like build your if you just lease an ready-built factory. You can start up your operation within like just like 3 months time from the time that you decide to lease, you decide to come to Vietnam. So this is another slide. We just tell about the market update. So we have North and South. You can see the land lease price is still cheaper than other country. And this is just like about BW. I mean, we have a joint venture between a world largest like private equity Warburg Pincus, and Baker Max is our shareholder, second shareholder based in Vietnam. It's a state-owned company. We are very experienced in developing infrastructure and also industrial park. So along the country, across the country, we have 14 sites available. This picture is one of our site in Broaden, which is like very, very close to the central business. So this is today my sharing today. I'll pass the time to Romain, and then we'll continue from there. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Michael, for giving us a bit more insights. Of course, as you can see here on the screen, you can feel free to contact them anytime. So now I'm very glad to welcome Romain today with us. So far we've been talking about a lot of theoretical things, but we are very happy to have Romain, who actually did this process and is going to talk about it today. So maybe first of all, Romain, can you please introduce yourself and your company?
Hello everyone. So I'm Romain. I am director of IML Containers Vietnam. And so just to introduce the company, we are a French family company. We manufacture food packaging. Basically, we started in France with the wood packaging, then carton packaging, and then in the latest phase of the development with plastic packaging. We have totally around 30 factories in the world, so 11 factories in France, then a big presence in America with 3 factories in Canada, 4 factories in US. And then we continued the development in South America with factories in Brazil or in Colombia. In Europe, we are also well established with factories in Germany, in Poland, in Romania, and in Turkey. And then the last factory was the factory established in Vietnam, and we started to manufacture from Vietnam since 2016.
Okay, so that's why we're here today. I have one important question for you. With the experience of your company, can you please explain to us how was made the decision of establishing in Asia?
So it started the beginning of 2014 when I was with my boss in front of a map like the one you see on the slide. He started with a joke saying, "Romain, do you notice that there is a problem on this map?" So then when I look on the map, I didn't really know how to answer him, but he insisted. And then he told me, "You don't see that we miss some pins on the right side of the map?" So of course we have it was meaning that we should invest in Asia. The target was to set up a factory within 1 year, and the target was also to avoid two big countries as China and India, because these markets are huge markets and it requires a lot of investment in order to follow the production volume required by this market.
Okay, so as we can see on the map, even if we take out China and India, it's still a big zone to explore. So can you explain to us how you proceeded to do the benchmark of these ASEAN countries?
So between these two huge countries, there is an important region of 600 million people in ASEAN. So I traveled in 7 countries of the ASEAN to analyze the market. So I have been in, of course, in Vietnam, in Indonesia, Thailand, Philippines, Malaysia, Cambodia, and Singapore as well. The target was to analyze the population, I mean, in terms of size, in terms of consumption, in terms of age also. The benefit, for example, of Vietnam is that, as it has been said before, it's a young population. Then after, the target also during this travel was to analyze by visiting in supermarkets all the packaging available and to see the potential of Vietnam, and also to evaluate how to set up one factory by analyzing the legal aspects, for example, or all the question of cost of land and so on.
Okay, so it must have been a very tough job to do this research. And finally, what's really interesting for us today is why you decided at the end to implement your factory in Vietnam.
So as you might know, there is always positive and negative points for each country, for every country. So if we start with the advantage, because there is more advantage than disadvantage in Vietnam, the first important point for us is that it's possible to invest as 100% foreign investment in Vietnam. We don't need a local partner. So as a family company, it was an important point for us. The second point is that for packaging, it's the logistic costs have an important part in terms of cost of product. And as it's the first factory in ASEAN, in Vietnam, the fact that Vietnam is the central position of the region, it's reducing the cost of shipping. We have, for example, now a customer in the Philippines, which we deliver from Vietnam. And when I studied the cost between Thailand and Vietnam, we save about $700 per container by shipping from Ho Chi Minh compared to Bangkok. So it gives us a really important benefit. Even if we can also, we have also to consider that the logistic is sometimes difficult in Vietnam due to the congestion of the port and airport due to the booming of the economy. As Thierry mentioned before also, we know that there is a lot of investment done on this infrastructure, so we are confident for future. Another point was in terms of consumption. In Vietnam, there is about 100 million people, and it's a young generation, and there is a lot of consumption. Another point also for packaging is that in one city like Ho Chi Minh, we see that there is a lot of convenience store, which increase the consumption of a single pack. And then for our business, it's better because you multiply the number of packaging. Also, even if the labor was the cost of the labor is still low, it's still lower than in the other country. It's for us not a huge benefit, but it's still an important point. For investing in Vietnam, we also have to consider the fact that on administrative points, there is also sometimes there is still a lot of paperwork, but we still can manage it manage it easily.
Which is probably the case in many countries,
Yeah.
still with these administrative problems.
And then also, as Michael told before, there is also in Vietnam, it's impossible to own the land. So we also have to consider that we have to rent the land for 50 years, and this is an investment which will come back every 50 years.
Okay, so thank you for the advantages and also the points that have to be considered because it's a reality. Let's do a quick feedback. So after 5 years now that you are in Vietnam, can you give us your general feedback and why it was a great strategic decision from your company?
Yeah. So as we the best proof that I can show here is that we are extending our current factory with 7,000 square meter more this year to follow all the increase of the sales year after year. Our first phase factory is completely full today, and we have to invest more to follow our development. Another important point in terms of choice that we did is the fact that we invested in industrial park. When you arrive in Vietnam, you can see that you have the possibility to rent a land cheaper than in industrial park, because if you invest not in an industrial park, but you, in fact, after it's imply also some risk with the authorities and also a risk for the supply. To give a clear example, when you are established in one industrial park, the industrial park infrastructure is dimensioned for the industry. When you are not in the industrial park, it's difficult to secure your supply in terms of water or electricity, because you don't know if the city will do another investment for a big building or something like that. So it's a good choice to invest in industrial park. And after, it's not really a choice, but it's a good surprise, is the fact that we have the possibility with the labor here to hire engineer for the as technician. So it's giving us one important technical level, and it's helped us to have a good technical level in the factory. This is also one thing which we consider in order to continue to train these technicians, in order to let them travel and install our own machine in other countries.
Okay, so overall, it was definitely a great decision. Thank you very much, Romain, for sharing it with us today. For your information, Romain was very happy that people could help him when he was choosing, so he remains at your disposal in case you would like to contact him. So feel free.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. So we are done with the presentations now. One thing that I would like to do very briefly is a special thanks to our partners. So we had many of our partners who shared the information, who shared with this webinar, who also invited some customers to share this valuable information. Thank you, of course, to our speakers. And let's now move to the questions that many of you have been asking. Okay, so first of all, we received many questions today. So we have to select some of them. We will try, of course, to respond to as many as possible. And don't worry, we will get back to you personally, one by one, with a concrete answer to your question. So maybe first one, I guess it's for you, Thierry. So in your point of view, how much additional capacity, for example, workers, factories, or industrial zones, can Vietnam offer? How much maybe in percentage of China's capacity?
Okay, so first I'm happy to be back with the camera. I hope it will work this time. So this question is not very easy to answer. I mean, comparing Vietnam with China is difficult. Vietnam is below 10% of the Chinese population. So the point of Vietnam is not to attract everything which will shift away from China. In terms of infrastructure, Vietnam is investing a lot. And the most important, I believe, is what we call the working age population. In Vietnam, which is slightly different than what happened in China. In Vietnam, the move of people from the countryside to the industrial zone is still ongoing. So you still have some resources which are coming to industrial zone as a labor. So I believe Vietnam can quite easily sustain 2, 3, or 4 times more investment in factories than they had in the past few years. The question will be, and I saw one question about this, the wage increase in Vietnam. For sure, the wage in Vietnam increased, I would say between 5 to 10% per year. But this is still less than in China, where it was about 13% per year for the last 20 years. So there will be a pressure on the Vietnam, but I believe they can still receive quite a lot of investment.
Okay, thank you very much. Second question, which is maybe a bit more dedicated to Romain with your experience. So would you say, generally speaking, that Vietnam's logistical capabilities for high volume exports are okay? And maybe more generally speaking, is the export and trade environment friendly for investors?
So in terms of logistics, I believe that the port in Ho Chi Minh, Cat Lai is one of the biggest of the region. So there is a huge capacity of exports. We export a lot of product overseas, and we don't have a lot of problem with the exportation. In terms of trade regulation, I think in Vietnam everything is done to attract industries in Vietnam. For me, I feel Vietnam as an industrial country, so there is a lot of advantage, a lot of support from the authorities to let us invest in Vietnam.
Okay, thank you. One for Michael now. So you mentioned during your presentation that Vietnam is attracting a huge amount of FDI, which is the case. Do you think there is a risk in any way that Vietnam cannot sustain such a flow of new industries? Can you imagine any bottleneck, maybe like a resource infrastructure in be able to receive so many factories at one time?
I think like Vietnam has been growing very, very fast over the past few years. The infrastructure-wise, there's a definitely lacking, and that's why the government has like devoted or put a lot of like resources upcoming to the infrastructure. Actually, like for Vietnam government, they are putting 5.7% or close to 6% of their GDP investment in the infrastructure. So very soon we will have like new projects coming up for the new airport, and then the national highway or the expressway connecting north and south will be on the way as well. So infrastructure wise, at this moment, we can see there's like a lot of like congestion, things like this. But then I believe that like the government is aware of this is going to be a bottleneck, or this is going to be an issue. So that's why they have like very, very strategic planning and long-term planning to get this like infrastructure done. And then in terms of other bottleneck, I think like in Vietnam in general, they have like quite a lot of resources. The most important resources that we have is like the labor force. I think the in terms of labor or in terms of population is young and is like very it's a very big population, which is like very, very difficult to find such a quality population of workforce in other parts of the in other countries. So I think like in general, Vietnam still got a lot of potential to receive or to sustain this kind of like manufacturing or labor intensive like productions.
Okay, so that's what we've seen with all your presentations today. Vietnam is very aware of its attractiveness, and it's also putting everything in place to attract more and more investors, which is a good news. A funny question, I would say, maybe for you, Thierry. Someone asked how Vietnam manufacturers can compete with the super cheap price of Chinese manufacturers. So very precise question, talking about the cheap price, or let's say super cheap price of the Chinese manufacturers. What would you respond to that?
Okay, so I mean, first, I don't think Vietnam should try to compete with a super cheap producer in China. This is not the strategy of Vietnam. And again, Vietnam is not the size of China. I would answer in two parts. First, if your production is made of a big part of labor cost, you need a lot of workers to produce, then Vietnam definitely can compete, even for the very large production. We mentioned already in the past, the labor in Vietnam is about 50 to 60 to 40% of the cost in China. So then, of course, it's worse if you have a lot of workers to be in Vietnam. Apart from that, I guess the advantage of Vietnam will not be on the super cheap Chinese huge production. For that, probably it's better to remain in China. But what you will have in Vietnam, we have a lot of customers working in the wood industry, in the furniture industry. And what they told us is that in Vietnam, they see much more flexibility in their order and delivery, which means that they can have several collections all over the year. To get sample, it will be much easier. The factory in Vietnam might be a bit smaller size, but this can bring some other advantages. So the answer would be competition with a super cheap Chinese product is probably not what Vietnam will choose as a strategy.
Okay, thank you very much. So when we have one question regarding, of course, the EVFTA, so this one is for you, Jean-Jacques. How can Vietnamese enterprises overcome some difficulties in satisfying the high requirements from the European market?
Well, this is the challenge, yeah. It is true that the European market is one of the most sophisticated in terms of quality of goods. And for the Vietnamese company, it is a challenge for them to know, first and foremost, the quality requirement, and beyond the quality requirement, all the expectation of consumers, for example, on label, sustainability, etc. It is really a complex issue which has to be satisfied both by knowing the expectation, the requirement, and also in delivering, in meeting this requirement. That's why I would say the Vietnamese company knows that the best place, the best, most able to support them are the companies in Europe. And that's for those of you who are interested in settling here in Vietnam, you are expected. And I would say Vietnamese company will try to come to you and to propose you partnership because they know that they cannot develop their export tool strategy without a strong partner in Europe. And that's where we hope to be able to create the win-win condition.
Okay, thank you, Jean-Jacques. Another one regarding the Vietnamese workers. So maybe Romain, you talked about it already a bit, but generally speaking, how would you describe Vietnamese workers?
So in general, as I said in the presentation, it's a good surprise for me after 5 years. There is a real target of in Vietnam. There is a real workers. The work is important. We can see that there is let's say a mindset of continuous improvement of conditions, of salary, of course, but also of personal improvement. In Vietnam, the education that the people have is a good education, but even with a good education today is not it's not enough. The important point is that in Vietnam, the people really want to improve. They have a good motivation to learn. They are curious. So, and they also have a target to show to all the other people from Western countries that they are able to do the same quality of job. So, yeah, the workers are good in Vietnam, and we have absolutely no problem in terms of labor.
Okay, that's a very important point. One another for you, Michael. So we said that the shift started already. Do you have an idea of the main countries which are actually investing in Vietnam? Is there any trend that you can see?
Actually, like over there are a lot of like foreign investors are interested in Vietnam for over a decade. We have like seen a lot of like Korea and Japan investment or Taiwan investment in Vietnam for manufacturing, and this remains to be a trend. And since last year, we have like the US-China trade war, and we have seen a lot more Chinese company coming to Vietnam as well. Actually, like those who produced in used to produce in China, they gradually moved from China to Vietnam. So that's one of these are the biggest countries. I mean, biggest investment from outside of Vietnam. And then among EU countries, Europe countries, we have seen a lot of like investment from Netherlands, France, and Germany. Probably these three countries are the top investment coming to Vietnam. And I believe this is going to be a trend. And actually, Europe countries with this EVFTA being ratified, I think like this is going to be an opportunity for Europe companies to come to Vietnam.
Okay, thank you. Regarding these free trade agreements, so we've been talking about the fact that Vietnam is signing more and more of them. Do you think that there will be other negotiations with other Asian countries, or do you expect the European Union to discuss some other FTAs in the future?
Well, talking about this part of the world, ASEAN, I would say that we already have the agreement which are in the pipe, if I may use these words, which are the free trade agreement with Thailand, with Philippines, with Malaysia, with Indonesia. So we have engaged most of them. Unfortunately, I must recognize that it is not developing so fast as it was the case for Singapore and Vietnam for various reasons, among others political reasons. As you know, some of these countries have known some events which have delayed the negotiation. So that's why I would tend to believe that Vietnam is the more secure basis for the time being if you want a foothold in the ASEAN region. On the middle and long term, it is clear that a free trade agreement between EU and ASEAN remain the ultimate goal. But as I told you during my first part, the experience we had in 2008 and 2009 showed that these countries were not ready in general to embark in an ambitious and modern agreement which goes beyond trading goods. But it remains the long-term goal, because only a free trade agreement between EU and ASEAN will enable to have a real free circulation of goods between the two entities. For the time being, if you export to Vietnam, your good will be accepted in Vietnam, but to be re-exported, it will be more difficult because there is no free trade agreement with the other ASEAN country. So unless the goods produced in Vietnam acquire the local origin, becomes Vietnamese goods, it will be very difficult for you to further circulate, distribute your goods beyond Vietnam. So ultimate goal will be the EU-ASEAN, I would say 5 to 10 years.
Okay, let's hope for it. It will be, of course, beneficial for both sides. Two questions, maybe same topic for you, Michael.
Yeah.
So the question is, if you plan to set up a factory in Vietnam, so we know Vietnam has different regions. First of all, how to choose between the different provinces of the country? And second question, how much of the process can be handled or, let's say, supported by an industrial park like BW?
Okay. First question first. I mean, like to set up to choose which province you should go to. probably you have to look into your supply chain, definitely, where your upstream products are coming from, or the downstream, where your products will be shipped to. If you are a supplier for those like Queenbees or big companies, probably you want to stay very, very close to them so that you can, to shorten the delivery timeline, because the infrastructure hasn't been very, very well in Vietnam. And then, so basically you can see a lot of electronics cluster in the north, while in the south we have seen a more diverse kind of like conventional business, packaging, textile and garments, footwear, furniture. We have like a lot more diverse industries in the south. So it all depends on your supply chain, and then that will be, I think, the main thing that you have to look into. And then other factors that I have mentioned in the presentation earlier, like the labor costs, all these, like the minimum wages, all these that you may have to take into consideration when you plan where you want to set up your factory. So, and then the second question is like, what as a BW or industrial park can support you? With BW, we offer you basically a full consultancy where you should choose your location. We have like plenty of choices available, and then we will help you to guide you through to get all the license necessary for your business setup, which can be complicated as a foreigner to understand, but we'll guide you through. That includes like investment certificate, enterprise certificate, firefighting, environmental. All these licenses will be necessary, but then like as an industrial park, we will guide you through, and then we can minimize your investment needed for like all those like infrastructure, including power, connection, wastewater treatment, all these things. So if you have any questions, you can always like come to us, and then we can give you some advice.
Thank you, Michael. During this presentation, the idea was to give you a bright overview of the possibilities, but if you have some dedicated questions, you can contact our speakers directly. Let's move to the next one. Maybe for Romain. So altogether, how long should you forecast between the time that you decide to invest in Vietnam and the moment that your operations are really running? So maybe you tell us how long it took for you, and to give the people who would like to come here an idea about that.
So I think that if you want to invest in Vietnam, if you plan to invest in Vietnam, you have two options to consider. The first one is to go with one ready-built factory, so which is the most efficient in terms of schedule. For that, you only have to consider the import of the equipment, or the setup of the equipment, and the legal parts of the legal part with the licensing. So to get the license, as I said before on the previous question, I think Vietnam is helping in terms of trade environment. It's easy to start the business here. So it takes about, I would say, between 4 and 6 months to get the license. So then after that, you only have to set up your equipment and you can start your operation in Vietnam. In our case, we didn't select this option because we were really confident about the market in Vietnam. So we were ready to invest directly in one land and after in a factory. So you have to consider in this case all the legal parts that I mentioned before, so around 6 months for the licensing, and then after the time of the construction, which is very efficient in Vietnam, about, I would say, for us it was about 8 months. So totally you have to consider about a year and a half to operate in your factory.
Okay, thank you very much for your feedback. Talking about the same subject, Michael, this one is for you as the expert of this industrial market. Do you have an idea of the price increase of the land in the coming 5 years? Because we've been talking about the fact that Vietnam is more and more attractive. So some people are asking us now live if you have an idea of like the situation could be in a couple of years.
All depends on the location, right? I mean, like close to the city center, Ho Chi Minh or Hanoi is like, or some of the biggest like industrial zones or province like Bình Dương, Dong Nai in the south, or Bắc Ninh in the north. It's very, very difficult to get land right now. I mean, you can see from my previous presentation that the occupancy is like up to like 90% or close to 100%. So even like, I mean, so whenever there is like second-hand supply available, then the pricing is going to be very, very high. We did, because like for BW, we are acquiring at the stage of like acquiring more projects and lands across the country as well to build our ready-built factory or warehouse. So we've seen like over the past years, some of the key locations is like up to like 30% growth in terms of like land price, land leasing price. And then for some of the other second tier province, probably around 5 to 10%. So the market has been very, very vigorous, I mean, in terms of like the business activities.
Okay, another question still to you, Michael, which has just been asked. I think you mentioned it very briefly in your presentation, but people would like to know again, how many ready-built factories are occupied for now? Talking about yours, obviously.
Our occupancy for those that we have built is always, I think we got a pretty good, I mean, investors coming. So last year all our factory before we built, they got all leased up. This year, despite of like this like COVID-19 impact, foreigners cannot come to Vietnam. We thought, I mean, in the beginning, we thought like this is going to impact our business quite a lot, because like foreign investor probably cannot come into Vietnam and do the investment. But in fact, this like COVID-19 or this pandemic actually speed up the business of like coming to Vietnam or considering moving to Vietnam. So that's why we covered this topic today. So we actually did experience a significant increase in terms of like inquiry, as well as the leasing area compared to last year.
Okay, thank you very much. Maybe we are going with our last question of the day. So someone is asking, are Laos and Cambodia also maybe new future options for later for an implementation in Asia?
It's a question for me.
I guess Thierry, it's a question for you.
Okay. I mean, you know, Laos is a small country with no access to the sea. Cambodia has access to the sea, and it's a much bigger country than Laos. But compared to Vietnam, it's quite small, and compared to China, it's even smaller. Actually, again, coming to Vietnam for your production is worth looking also at the market around Vietnam, which include, of course, Cambodia and Laos. It's quite easy to distribute your product, to sell from Vietnam to Cambodia and to Laos. If the question is in terms of industry to set up in Laos and in Cambodia, Laos, frankly, that's not huge potential. Cambodia, you have some nice opportunities, mainly in textile, a bit in some wood industry. So it's worth looking at with sometimes some good incentive in terms of export back to some country. But definitely, at least for the time being, Vietnam is leading the attractiveness in the region.
Okay, thank you very much. We are coming to the 1 hour 30. So thank you very much for replying to all those questions. I will be happy now to close this webinar for today. So I'm very happy that so many people joined. Thank you again, Jean-Jacques, Thierry, Michael, and Romain, for the nice presentation that you did. I'm saying it again, but you will receive, of course, the recording, even with those little technical stuff that we had to go through. You will receive it, and you will have all the contact details of today's speakers. So again, we remain at your disposal in case you have any question regarding Vietnam in general. Thank you very much and have a nice day.